some of them fairly quickly because they're things that people probably already know. So this is the leadership, this is our executive committee and the members of our external advisory board. And we thank them very, very much for all of their help and contributions over the past, in some cases, 10 years, and for folks at the University of Michigan and ICPSR. They were a new addition to the program in 2015 when we were funded. So the CLDR, the first 5 years, that's the acronym we have now. Anybody remember what the acronym was in the first 5 years? Is Beth here? Beth would probably know. Oh, good. I just had a question for you, Beth.
CRRLD.
CRRLD, yeah. So the Center for Rehabilitation Research Using Large Data Sets. That one actually kind of matched the acronym. The CLDR acronym that we use now is just a shortened version of the title, which is the Center for Large Data Research and Data Sharing and Rehabilitation, because the data sharing component is something we added in the second cycle. And our advisory board members, and again, we have very well-known, experienced, just excellent people on the advisory board, and we really do. They've been very helpful. In fact, when we sent out the email just describing we were going to have this meeting, it was going to be the first meeting of the day, and we were going to talk about how we might move forward. Several people started writing emails and sending information back and responding to it before we even had the meeting. So they are interested and committed to what we are doing. And we're part of this larger rehabilitation research infrastructure network that NIH funded. This is funded by several institutes. And there's a coordinating center that's now run by the folks at UAB, and they refer to it as MR3. So these are the current centers. There's 6 centers that are currently funded. The competitive renewals for this cycle of the grants have already happened, and the new centers will probably be announced in the next month or so. And there's going to be some changes. So there'll be 6 new centers. So these centers, you know that they're there and they've been doing work in these different areas. And they all are on very different topics. And I'm not going to spend time talking about each one of them. But if you want to find out, you can go to MR3, you can go to their website, and they have information. But you should know that the centers are going to change. So there's going to be 6 centers, and there's going to be a couple of them that will be similar to what they have now, but there's going to be 4 brand new centers. And so that's going to be an exciting opportunity for the field in terms of new areas that are going to be the focus of these infrastructure. These are infrastructure grants. They're not research grants. They provide pilot projects, they provide training, they create programs and activities in their area of expertise. And their real goal is to help build research capacity within the rehabilitation field in these specific areas. So these are our areas that we've been working on: education and training, the data directory, data archiving, pilot projects, and we have a visiting scholars program. And these are some of the statistics in terms of the activities we've been engaged in over the last, this is mostly the last five years. The number of presentations and activities and programs. So again, the data directory, and this is something that Bill is going to talk a little bit about in a few minutes, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. We've asked the folks at Cornell to do something a little bit different with the data directory in this last year, and that's to add data warehouses. So how many people are familiar with the data warehouses? There's all kinds of data warehouses that are starting to become available. And that's a new resource. And the data warehouses are primarily electronic health records, electronic medical record kind of information for health systems largely. And again, it's part of what we talked about last year, that we were going to that's a direction that we were planning on going. And we have been doing so. We have the Optum data, which is one of the data sets that's available, the data warehouse that's out there that has electronic health records from across the health system. And we've been doing some work on that and working on papers. So, but Bill's going to talk about the data warehouses and how we're incorporating that into the data directory. And this is the data directory. If you haven't been to the website and looked at the data directory, it's really evolved over the 10 years into a very useful tool. And we get a fair number of people who use it, and we get a lot of really good comments about it. Because these are data sets that are specifically related to rehabilitation, rehabilitation and disability and recovery. And so it's a good resource for people in the field. Obviously, they can go to Google and look stuff up, and they could probably find a lot of these, but they'd have to spend some time searching for them. Whereas in the data directory, they're there. And there's cross-variable catalogs and ways to connect them in a variety of different ways. And so the archiving process, ADEP is the portal at ICPSR, and Shane is going to talk some about that. And it's a portal for archiving data related to rehabilitation and disability and recovery. And this has been a new area. Well, it's not so new now because we've been doing it for 5 years. But this is an example of, we have a variety of different data sets that have been archived that are in ADEP. And you're going to hear about the four of them in a little bit. And one of the ones you're going to hear about is this one. That's Atlas. The acronym for it is Atlas. And this is something that's a little different for us. It was archiving images. And these are images related to stroke. And Lee's here. Lee? Yeah. So Lee is going to talk. Sukley Lee is the person who did this archiving activity, and she's going to tell us a little bit about it. And this is a data set that it's been downloaded over 2,000 times. So it's something that people are using. People are finding helpful. And again, she's gotten publications and other accolades, and a lot of people are interested in. She'll tell you a little bit about that in a few minutes. So this is an overview of our activities. So I know there's a lot on here, but I like this slide. So this is a slide that shows the bottom part of it is all the pilot projects that we funded and the visiting scholars in 2010 to 2015. And then the dark column there is all the pilot projects and visiting scholars that we did from 2016 to 2020. And then the map shows the difference between the pilot projects and the visiting scholars. So we've had pilot projects and visiting scholars who have come from all over the country, and we, in the first cycle, we had pilot projects that had a little more money, and we were kind of new at it, so we didn't do quite as many. In the second cycle, we were a little more comfortable with it, and we were a little more flexible with the funding, because when you're talking about large data projects, if people are using data that's already out there, they're not going out and collecting data. It's not, you can do quite a bit with $30,000. You don't need $50,000. You don't need huge amounts of money to do some of these pilot projects. And a lot of these pilot projects have turned into other kinds of activities. And I won't, because she won't say this for herself, but Lee, when she presents, she started out, she actually got kind of involved in the program because she's on a K-12 plan. So she's an occupational therapist at USC. And she was on a K-12 program, and then she applied and she got a K-01, and she had the K-01s, and she was doing this work, and she came up with the idea of archiving this. And so, okay, yeah, look, we hadn't done it. And the folks at ICPSR hadn't done this kind of stuff before, and but they were willing to try, and they did it, and it's worked out really well. Lee has just, she's got an R01 that's gotten a good score, and she's probably going to get that funded. She hasn't got it funded yet, but so she's done the trajectory that we had hoped for as people come and get involved in the process. So again, you're going to meet her and hear about some of her work in a few minutes. So we started out in the first 5 years, we just had one category pilot projects, and they were the traditional pilot projects, and people got, I think it was around $30,000 to do a project that was related to large data. And then in the second 5 years, we added another pilot project, and that was a category 2, and that's the archiving pilot project. And the archiving pilot projects were less money. And so we've been doing those. And then we also, in this travel work, we started this travel work. Again, the purpose of this grant is to build research capacity. And we're building research capacity in kind of a new area for the field of rehabilitation. And so the logical place to really focus is on the new people, on the students, and on the postdocs, and on the early career faculty that are coming up, because they're the ones who are really going to be doing this. They're the ones that are going to be the future. So we wanted to do something that's kind of investing in those early career investigators. So we created this travel award. And this was actually an idea that got discussed and came out of the advisory board meeting. This was something that several meetings ago we said we were thinking about doing something, and I can't remember what we started out with, but I think it was Alan who came up with the idea of doing this. And then we tweaked it and ended up implementing it. It's turned out to be great. So someone who does a study, reports, uses data from one of the archived studies that we have, and writes a paper or does a research study using that data. If they do that, then they can apply to us, and we will give them some travel money to go present the presentation. And we actually have a slot now at the ACRM, the American Congress of Rehabilitation and Medicine. So they've given us a slot at the conference that we have just to present the findings and the work of these folks, the early career faculty that are doing these awards. So that's been something that's new, and I think it's been something that I've enjoyed being involved with. And we have the Visiting Scholars Program, and the Visiting Scholars Program is just what it says. We provide an opportunity for people to come and spend some time. Most people have come and visited us, but they have the opportunity to go to one of the consortium institutions as well. And a lot of people who get pilot projects, if they get a pilot project, and particularly if they're using some of these large data sets that they're not that familiar with, then they need some help. And so they'll come and they'll be a visiting scholar, and we'll help them with kind of creating analytical files they need and doing some of the data management. And sometimes they'll come 2 or 3 different times. And a couple of those people have actually turned into collaborators, and they're people that are working with us. And Dr. Elsin is someone here. Ah, there she is. So Dr. Elsin has been one of the people who has worked with these visiting scholars and been very, very successful. Everybody that works with her publishes their projects get published. And that's one of her rules. If you're going to work with me, I'll work with you, but we got to publish it. It's got to get published. And she's gotten a couple of people that are now collaborators with her, that are working with her on other projects that weren't related, or not the original one that they started with the Visiting Scholar Program. And so this is, kind of, if you're making an impact, are we making an impact? And some of you I know have seen these before. This is a little bit old now, but I Googling big data, and the images, you can get all the images. Well, Googling big data, and our logo comes up, and I figured, okay, that's my operation definition of success. You're on the images page for big data.
Did you have to pay him, Ken?
No, I think, I didn't even know you could do that. I guess you can, but like I said, I think if you Googled it now, you wouldn't get it. It wouldn't come up. It's,
You can see that was sponsored.
And so I'm going to stop here and say that what we're thinking about now is kind of what's going to be the future. Now, obviously, we're not going to have the PTC grant in this program, but there really is a lot of activity and a lot of opportunity for people in our field in rehabilitation, disability recovery, in this area of large data. And it's interesting to see how it's evolved. And I know I've told many of you this before, but when we first started, the term big data didn't exist in the rehab or clinical world very much. Maybe some in the business world and some other areas. We just referred to it in our original grant as large data because that's kind of what we thought it was. And then NIH in 2012 started the BD2K program, Big Data to Knowledge program, that was initiated in the Office of the Director. And then all of a sudden there was money available to do this. And everybody knew BD2K, the big data. And that's still pretty widely used and active term. But if you look at the big data, the things they were funding and the focus of it was very analytical. It was very much on how the statistical stuff and the analysis that went into it. And the centers that they funded were teaching people how to do the analysis and how to do that. And that was one phase. And so just recently, in 2018, NIH came up with a strategic plan for data science. And so they're no longer using the term big data. They don't use BD2K. The people who are running the program at NIH are changed to another office. They're a whole different set of people. And it's data science. And data science is a much broader view of what's involved in doing this kind of work. So obviously analytics is part of it, but there's 5 components, and analytics is one of the components. But developing investigators, workforce development is one of the components. So that's how you train people to do this. And there are obviously, if there's 5 and there's 3 other components. So it's much broader. And that strategic plan just came out a year ago. Well, a little more than a year ago now, it was in 2018. But there are now RFAs and funding announcements that are starting to come out from NIH related to data science. And they're much broader than the original ones that came out of BD2K. So people who are interested in this field should be watching for those because there are now those types of funding. And there are funding opportunities in lots of other places as well, because this is getting to be if you want to sort of see the next step or read about the next step, there's a book out called Deep Medicine. Anybody read Deep Medicine? So Deep Medicine is by Eric Topol. He's a cardiologist. He's written 2 or 3 books related to healthcare initiatives, but the deep medicine is really the artificial intelligence. It's about AI and its role in medicine, and it really is a fascinating book. So if you want to see the next step beyond data science, I'd strongly suggest that you take a look at the deep medicine. It's really a great book.